Good evening. I am Karen Taylor, Programme Director of the General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen of the City of New York, and I'm delighted to welcome both our online and indeed our in-person audience to tonight's lecture, The Magnificent Bridges of New York City with photographer Dave Frieder. I also want to mention that this really fabulous book is for sale, and Dave would be delighted to sign the book for you after the talk. And for our online audience, the book is available at www.davefrieder.com. I want to express our great thanks to the New York Landmarks Conservancy for their help in promoting tonight's talk. For those of you who may be less familiar with the General Society, a brief introduction. The General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen of the City of New York was founded in 1785 by 22 skilled craftsmen. Today, our 238-year-old organization continues to serve and improve the quality of life for the people of the City of New York through our educational and cultural programs. These include our tuition-free Mechanics Institute, the General Society Library, of course, of which you are in this evening, the John M. Mossman Locke Museum upstairs, and you're also welcome to visit that after the talk this evening for our in-person audience, and our nearly 200-year-old lecture series, of course, of which this lecture is part of. For the online audience, please feel free to submit type questions at any point during the lecture through the Q&A section. For the in-person audience, we do ask that you hold off on your questions until the end of the talk. We have here this evening an extraordinary photographer, and we are so delighted that he is about to share his breathtaking images of 20 iconic New York City bridges with all of us this evening. Dave Frieder has been interviewed by many TV and radio stations worldwide about his photographs. He's appeared in dozens of newspapers and magazines and has presented many photographic exhibits. Much of his outstanding bridge photography can be found at his website at www.davefrieder.com and his YouTube channel. It's now my huge pleasure to introduce to you Dave Frieder.
Thank you very much. I'd like to start off basically to tell you where I started this and where I originally came from. Actually, I am from Queens. My father's parents lived in Manhattan. My great-grandfather came to the States in the late 1800s from Hungary. My mom's side is Romanian, so I'm not Native American, but I have no fear of heights. My mom's mom lived in Brooklyn, Flatbush. Missed that place, had great fun there when I was a kid. And we moved to Jersey in '59. What impressed me about bridges probably is that in Flushing, they used to have the old bascule Flushing Bridge, if some of you remember, over the Flushing River. And that, as a kid, fascinated me. You drive over this bridge, but part of it, the deck would raise up. It would face you like this, then it would come down. And wow, now you're driving over it. And that, as a 3-year-old, fascinated me. Then we moved to New Jersey, crossing my personal favorite bridge, the GWB, and they were building the lower roadway. And I said, isn't that amazing? The engineer who built the GWB designed it for a lower deck. But then I didn't realize it was also originally designed for 4 lanes of light rail. That's what it was originally designed for, 4 lanes of light rail. And the bridge is actually strong enough, it could hold 3 decks. That's how strong it is. But how would you funnel all that traffic in and out? It's not designed for 3 decks. But it became really fascinating, and driving in and out of New York, the West Side Highway, especially the FDR Drive, all the different bridges, they all serve the same function, but they all look so different. Then I got involved with photography because my father had a little brownie camera, and I started photographing our dog, photographing people, plants and whatnot. And then my father showed me a poster of Ansel Adams' Moonrise. And I said, that's a neat photograph. And I said, I have to find out more about this person. I heard of him, but I wasn't sure. And then doing some investigating, I said, his work is phenomenal, black and white. Look at his work. It's incredible. So I contacted the Ansel Adams Gallery in Yosemite National Park. And they had me in touch with a fellow named Jeff Nixon, who was Ansel's workshop assistant. He in turn connected me with John Sexton, Ansel's personal assistant. Then I got to meet almost every member of Ansel's family. I'm still in touch with a lot of them. I got to meet Virginia Adams, Ansel's wife. Jeff Nixon, his workshop assistant, actually locked me in Ansel's darkroom for 15 minutes. I said, wow, this is where the master created his work. Actually, Ansel's originally from San Francisco. This was in Carmel Highlands. And so John Sexton had photographed on top of the Golden Gate Bridge. And then Ron Wisner, who makes my big wooden field cameras, mind you, I still prefer film, also photographed on top of the Golden Gate Bridge. And I said, wait a minute, were there more bridges than anywhere in the world? Right here in New York City. And then I realized, and this is true, 2,077 bridges in the 5 boroughs of New York City. This includes bridges that go over land or water. So I was like, wow, this might be an idea. So to make a long story short, after all the begging, the pleading, the phone calls, the letters, I had almost unprecedented access to climb and photograph every New York City bridge until 9/11. And that hit me hard. I love those Twin Towers. They were just so cool. I got to meet Les Robertson, engineer of structural design, who knew my work. I was like, wow, he knows my work. That's like, holy geez, that's like incredible. I was in infatuation with that. And then I met a lot of other people. I met a lot of engineers. And so I decided to put this book together on the 20 most well-known bridges of the great city of New York. And it took me 26 years, and I never thought I'd get it done, but it's done. And I thank you. I went through a lot of red tape, the heartache, the aggravation, not so much money, but all the red tape, the politics involved before and after 9/11, but it was accomplished. So while I was up photographing all these bridges, I wanted to take some photographs to show you folks what it's like to climb and photograph every one of these magnificent structures. And I'll explain a little as I go along. I love the Brooklyn Bridge, but I love steel, but I'm very familiar with the engineering. This was designed by John Roebling. It was built by his son, Washington Roebling. John Roebling actually was doing some surveying and his foot was crushed. He didn't believe in modern medicine. Tetanus set in and he passed away. So Washington Roebling, his oldest son, was then in charge of building the bridge. The bridge is main granite above the waterline, New York limestone below. This bridge has galvanized steel wires. Let me see. This is what a piece of wire for the main cables look like. It's a little less than a 1/4 inch diameter. This is galvanized steel. Brooklyn was the first bridge to use galvanized steel wires in the construction of its main cables. 5,434 wires make up a 15 3/4 inch diameter cable. And that's one of my cameras. That's a 5x7 Wisner camera or field camera. This I took on cable D. There's 4 cables. They're labeled A, B, C, and D from south to north. And recently, if you notice, the bridge looks really nice. They recently power washed all the stonework. Came out beautiful. That's another view. I'm on the cables. Originally, which I'll show, this had light rail and trains, shuttle trains going across the deck. Those were removed in the mid-1950s, roughly. Here I'm on the cable looking up. That's only about 272 feet to the water. So for me, it's not that high. I don't feel it's that high. There I am on the cable. There's Manhattan Bridge, and there's the Williamsburg Way in the distance. The suspender ropes hold most of the vertical load, wind loads. The diagonal stays help reduce some of the swaying in the bridge, and they take maybe 25% of the loads of the deck. Here I am sitting on the cable. And the camera I use is called a Hasselblad. You might have heard of Hasselblad, medium format camera, and I use a gyroscope at the base of the camera. This keeps the camera pretty stable during any movement or vibrations. And you can see I am hooked up to the hand ropes. That's my lanyard, hook up to the hand ropes. This view is looking straight down. So here's the 3 roadways. on one side, 3 on the other. And there's the walkway originally. If I can use this pointer here. This roadway right here was for shuttle trains, and in 1888, they installed shuttle cars, shuttle trains. But then, like I said, in the mid-50s, that was all removed, and now it's strictly vehicular traffic. Now, if you look carefully in this photo looking down, whoops, I'm sorry. I have to back up with this. I'm better off with this way. This portal you might have seen on the southern arch on both towers. This little portal, this takes you inside the tower. It goes up a rung ladder, then you come up diagonally, a slight angle, then there's a chamber, a hollow chamber above, 2 sections of the chamber above on the southern arch on both towers. That's what the contractors used when the bridge was first built and during the rehab in the mid-1980s. Of course, you can't access the top because it's sealed from underneath. I never had a chance to go in there, but I have diagrams and some engineer took photos inside the towers. It's pretty neat. Here I'm lying down on the cable to get the view. There's Twin Towers. I was going to mention that for me, this is really emotional, seeing the Twin Towers there. I was there when I was a kid, when it was Radio Row. So I remember when the twins weren't even there. Here's a self-portrait of myself and one of the ironworkers. I thought this was kind of neat. I like the way it was out of focus. Now, this is the Queensboro Bridge. That's what I call it, because this really was the first major bridge between the borough of Manhattan and the borough of Queens. This bridge uses I-bars. As you can see, it doesn't use parallel wire cables. At this point, the I-bars are approximately 45 degrees. So climbing up these I-bars at 45 degrees with 60, 70 pounds of equipment was pretty tough. Now, mind you, I did gymnastics for 20 plus years, rings and high bar. So I'm in pretty good shape still, but that was still a lot of work to lug all that equipment up to the top of the towers. That was the only way to get up there. Some parts do have a rung ladder, but it was really difficult. It was easier just walking up the I-bars. That's looking straight down. This was a platform, an observation platform, and there was a spiral staircase here. So before this roadway, this was a walkway, and there was 2 sets of train tracks, so you could access this platform. But when the trains were removed, this became strictly vehicular traffic. Now, some people say this looks like an erector set. Well, it's funny, I collect erector sets. I had one as a kid, so that might have added my interest to photographing and climbing all the bridges of New York. This I call Sea of Steel. This is the flat portion that goes across Roosevelt Island. So I saw this view and I said, oh, this is awesome. I have to get this. So luckily across here, there was a hand rope or safety rope. So I walked across this box beam, hooked up my safety harness, and just got a view from the center. Looking through the truss work, again, this is the flat portion across Roosevelt Island. You'd never see this unless you climb these box beams. Now, this is from Tower 3, because the towers are labeled from Queens to Manhattan, 1, 2, 3, 4. This is myself on top with my camera. Unfortunately, the camera didn't work too well on most of the bridges because the vibration would transmit through the tripod legs to the camera and everything would be out of focus. So most of my camera work was with the Hasselblad with the gyroscope. This finial, I call it a crown. It reminds me of a queen's crown. Had a 50-foot flag mast, but they took those out in 1960 due to severe rust. So now they put aviation beacons at the top. So that's the end of that. Another view looking down. Now this section here, I'm on that lower platform. To get to the top, mostly I had to climb through these box beams, zigzagging till I got to the top. That was one easy way to get up there. Another view at the top. Again, these are really steep, all these I-bars. These are about 1.5 inches, 2 inches wide. Looking across, there's Great Twin Towers. This is the old Goldwater Hospital, which is no longer there. So I'm on the top of the North Crown looking at the southern one. Usually I get number 10 days, blue sky and white clouds. I mean, those days I don't want to go home. This is from the Queen side. There's the Queen branch of Citicorp. And that's me at the top. Now, the only way to climb this is from the outside, because inside here, this is 2 feet diameter. There's nothing to grab onto here. So I had to climb the outside, and then the iron worker with me, he took a few images of me at the top. Now, this is Manhattan Bridge, first modern suspension bridge. This was designed by Leon Moisef. He was also advisory engineer design for GWB. He worked with Joseph Strauss on the Golden Gate, and he also worked with who was it? David Steinman on the Mackinac and a few other bridges. He was brilliant, but unfortunately, his most well-known bridge, as you know, Tacoma Narrows from the wind, that collapsed in 1940. But he was really a brilliant engineer. Unfortunately, the engineer of design usually gets the blame if there's a major catastrophe. But this is the first modern suspension bridge. It uses a cellular type design. These finials or spheres, I call them, are just decoration. These were replaced. These are cast iron. The new ones are cast steel. That's a view at the top. Again, this is all just decoration. This is the first bridge to, again, be galvanized steel wires. It has the first bridge to use a Warren type stiffening truss. And again, cellular design. It doesn't have box beams like the GWB or Williamsburg. That's the view at the top. Now this blue, this is, in case you don't know, this is one of New York City's colors. New York City's colors is orange, white, and blue. So this originally was a gray when it was first constructed. It was open to traffic December 31st, 1909, but it wasn't completed until a few years later. At the time, Mayor McClellan just wanted the bridge opened to traffic as a good omen to the new year. Here's the 3 roadways, 1 lower roadway, 2 upper roadways. These used to be for light rail. And underneath here, of course, the 2 sets of train tracks. Originally, when the bridge was built, the bridge would deflect like this, 4 to 6 feet, because of the trains, the weight of the trains. They reinforced it, so now it's about a foot or 2 of deflection. View from, I'm standing on top of the sphere, like you saw in my postcard, looking south. There's the Statue of Liberty. That's looking up at the top of the tower. All the steelwork is decorative. What I call this bridge has the most architectural embellishments of any New York City bridge. View at the platform. This has also a platform and a ladder that takes you to the top. Looking out, there's the Verrazano. This is inside the tower. This hatchway takes you to inside the cell, takes you all the way down to the stone base. I did that, and I had to wear a spelunker's hat because I couldn't see with a light on it. Here's the 3 roadways. Another view, this was a Sunday afternoon. Sometimes they just let me go up there as long as I didn't go on the cables when they weren't there. And I never had a problem, never had an incident, never had a problem with anyone. Everyone was so cooperative. And that's me looking straight down from the top of the sphere. Again, heights never fazed me. I think it's a thrill being up so high. It's just like, wow. That's looking at the canopies. There's 4 of these canopies, 2 on each tower. The original lenses are gone. I have 1 last original lens, and then they replaced them all with these clear lenses. It's definitely nicer looking, but it's not like original. And this is the bronze plaque. There were 3 of them that were missing. They restored them. This dictates all the information about the bridge. And now, unfortunately, it's covered with graffiti. So it's hard to control that. I mean, this looks so beautiful, all this steel work and iron work. View looking out through the tower. This is Williamsburg. This is the first major all-steel suspension bridge. This was designed by Lefferts Buck. He actually went to Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute with Washington Roebling. This used ungalvanized wires in the construction of its main cable, unfortunately. And the time the city finished rebuilding this bridge, it cost over $1 billion. But in the long run, if they looked at the figures, it was cheaper than building a new bridge. But I think this bridge is really cool looking. This is the saddle housing. This is all new copper. They coated it with a polymer so it doesn't turn green like the Statue of Liberty. Looking down at the truss work, I actually climbed up these box beams to get some views from this point, which I'll show you. Here's on my feet, I'm looking straight down. This has two sets of railroad tracks. This has what's called a town stiffening truss or lattice type stiffening truss. It was named after the engineer. I forget his first name, but his last name was Town. Here is the upper cord. There's two cords generally on a bridge on the stiffening truss, upper, and then the lower cord. Here are the main cables leading up to the tower. That's a view looking through the suspender ropes. Another view. I always try to get a yellow cab in there. It adds kind of a touch to the photograph, especially when it's color. This is looking through the top. I love this cathedral-like look. It is really awesome up there. This is where I'm on the other cross piece. This is only about a half-inch thick. So I parked myself on here looking across to the other tower. There's the Twin Towers. And actually this was taken August 1st, 2001. So less than 2 months later, they would be gone. This is when they installed a new, what's called orthotropic deck. Instead of the 7 inches of concrete on the deck, they installed this lightweight steel deck. The ends were welded together under sand to keep the temperature uniform. They installed a polymer on top, 2 inches of asphalt, blacktop, and there's your new road deck. It's a lot lighter and stronger than the original. There's the road deck before it was coated with the polymer and the blacktop. And note that's that photograph, and I believe this one was an E&R magazine, Engineering News Record. Here's the completed roadway. They made a nice touch with the American flags. This is the track level. They also replaced all the tracks and all the supports, and I was able to touch the third rail. It was definitely off because I wouldn't be standing here otherwise. Mind you, in case you didn't know, that rail holds 600 volts at 4,000 amps DC. Nasty stuff. And trains are basically, it's just a big DC motor. Here's a view from track level. Again, I climbed up these box beams to get to there. Another view. This is the saddle where the cables sit over the top of the tower. You can see the ribs here. This is called the saddle room. This is a view looking from the top. I'm standing on top of one of the saddle rooms here, getting a view of old downtown Manhattan. I mean, this is so magnificent. This is Hellgate Bridge, designed by Gustav Lindenthal, brilliant engineer. He worked with Othmar Ammann on many bridges. There's a photo of him, David Steinman and Othmar Ammann standing in front of the unfinished Hellgate Bridge, 1916. Ammann went to go work for himself as well as David Steinman. And all three were pretty much rivals. But Lindenthal was pretty much a master of engineering with this incredible bridge. And mind you, the Sydney Harbor Bridge and the Bayonne were modeled after the Hellgate. And this is, I guess, a maroon. It was designated by what's the name? Senator Patrick Moynihan. It was originally was black, but he liked this brilliant Hellgate red. 4 tracks were in use at the time. Now there's only 3, 2 of Amtrak and 1 of freight. Here's an Amtrak train coming through. Again, this is all granite. They cleaned this with chemicals. They didn't power wash it like the Brooklyn. This is a track level. There's only overhead catenary. There's no third rail, so it's very safe to walk. But I could not go up there unless I was with someone from Amtrak, and you have to take a track safety course because it could be very dangerous. A train could come upon you within minutes. You'd never know it. And he has an air horn to clear you out of the way. And of course, I had to have a very high liability insurance policy. I mean, just to be safe. I never dropped anything, never had a problem, but you never know. Here's another view. Now I walked the lower cord, which the guy from Amtrak thought I was crazy, got to here, climbed to here, sat down, scooted across. Then I got some views from this center connector plate. I come back down, and a guy looks at me and says, "You're crazy." But he had to lower my equipment to me with a rope from the top all the way down about 30 feet to this point. That's after I hooked up my safety harness, had my camera ready. He lowered my equipment. Oops. Then he lowered everything back up. I walked back down the lower cord. This used to be a service walkway. The wood had rotted away, so they removed it all. This is the lower chord, which I'm walking up. No safety railing, but I was very secure. Another view. Here I am at the top. Now this is Triborough, and that is the only name I will use. I refuse to go along with these name changes. I mean, it's connecting three great boroughs of New York City. It is not for a Republican or Democrat or any other person involved with the US government. It is for the three boroughs of New York City. The same with the Tappan Zee Bridge and Queensboro Bridge and Marine Parkway Bridge. I refuse to go along with that. And the proper names are in my book. I mean, I have to list the other names, but luckily they're in really small print. So you may need an electron microscope to find that name. Now, it's actually sorry, let me go back. This is the second design. The first design was designed by a fellow named Arthur I. Perry. It would have been 2 decks, so 4 lanes on each side, and the towers would have looked a lot like the Brooklyn Bridge. But then Othman Ahman came in with, again, Alston Dana. This is after the Depression. They redesigned the bridge for 8 lanes at 1 level. Now, this is an aviation beacon support. There's the beacon up there. This is, I call severe clear. Deep blue skies. This is from the center strut. There's 3 struts. Top strut, I'm standing on the middle, and the bottom strut is at underneath the road deck. That's looking straight down. Here's a walkway. This is the queen side. There's the middle strut right here. Looking out towards Ward's Island, Randall's Island. I call this again severe clear. I'm at the top of the northernmost aviation beacon tower, and there's all of downtown Manhattan. There's the Manhattan and Queens branch of Citicorp. They're the great twins. You can just barely make out 1 or 2 bridges in the distance there. But this was gorgeous day. I had to wear sunglasses. It was so blindingly clear out. This is the top of the tower. This is in a way similar to Manhattan Bridge. It's really explicit detailing, but this part here is very similar to Manhattan Bridge. There's so many similarities between the bridges. It's amazing. And there I have another self-portrait. I always liked, again, the yellow cab. Now these vertical struts, these serve no function. These are just taking up the space between the top and middle strut. They didn't really have to put these in there, but this big open gap would look a little peculiar. So the engineers decided to put these I-beams between the 2 struts. Here I'm on the cable. This day there was some engineers working on the lights. So it was like 5 of us on the cable. That was a really cool day. I really like that. Here I'm walking on the centered divider from one end to the other. The manager was a little hesitant on that, but he said, just make sure you're staying in the middle. I have no problem. And so I got some great views walking along the center divider. He's looking straight up at the tower. I'm putting my best foot forward again. And here's the main cable, so I'm above the main cables. This is the lift span. This is one of the largest lift spans in the world. The center portion that lifts, it's 4,000 tons. It's a lot of weight. And these counterweights that sit up here, 2,000 tons each. And they had to fill them slowly with lead weights. That's one of the counterweights. These are the lift ropes. This is before they put all these railings and all kinds of other whatever at the top of the towers. This had nice clean lines. After 9/11, everything changed. You're looking straight down. These are the aviation beacons. And actually, I got a hold of one of them. So I cleaned it up, repainted it. Each bulb is 600 watts. I got an electronic timer. I have it in my living room. When I turn that on, it's like, you need like 3 sunglasses. It's so bright. Someone said, would you put it outside? I said, I'd have the police and the fire trucks at my house in 5 minutes. I can't put it outside. But it's really cool. Here's a view again of the lift ropes. They have this, like, I guess, canvas, whatever, at the base. If any oil drips down, it won't leak all over the steelwork. It's like a sponge in a way. View of the span. Looking up. Here's 125th Street. There's Harlem River Drive coming in to meet the FDR. This is the truss span. This almost became a lift span, but the channel beneath it was filled in. So they just left it the way it is. You can see the lift span in the distance. So the would have been steel work on top of these concrete towers to lift the span up. But again, that was changed when they filled in between Ward's Island and Randall's Island. That's taking you to the Bruckner, going north. And this is the Throgs Neck. The Throgs Neck was derived from a man named John Throckmorton, an early settler to the area. I don't know how they derived the name Throgs Neck, but I always put in the extra G. And it's not an extra G, that's actually how it's supposed to be spelled. But again, like Verrazano, TBTA left off one letter to save money on signs, which is ridiculous. The only thing I liked about one of the politicians, he added and correctly corrected the name of Verrazano with 2 Z's. This should be also 2 G's. But anyhow, this is almost identical to Verrazano, except that has a flattened arch. It's not perfectly circular. This was completed, open to traffic, January 11th, 1961. That's, like I said, inside the tower, it's identical to Verrazano. There's the college, Maritime College. Here's the top of the tower, one of the fellows with me. There's the Whitestone. For some reason, I always got there, it was a hazy day. That's okay. That's me on the cable. This is about the size of Manhattan Bridge cable, about 21 inches diameter. Here's another view from the center that's looking down. These are called rocker links. Some bridges have them, most of them do. This connects the stiffening truss to the tower. So if the stiffening truss moves, this is going to move or rock with it. Verrazano has similar GWB rocker links connect to the lower cord. This is the upper cord. Here's the Bayonne. Again, this was from the genius of Othman Amin and Alston Dana, modeled after the Hellgate. Hellgate uses I-beams to support the road deck. This uses suspender ropes. Again, I walked to the middle and got this view. Again, if you remember, recently, within the last few years, the road deck was raised 65 feet from 159 feet to 215 feet for river traffic. This originally was known as the Kilvan Cull Bridge. That's looking straight down about 305 feet. That's me at the top. This is just surface rust, nothing structural. It's pretty steep, but I had no problem with it. This is the old Goethals Bridge, and mind you, that is the correct pronunciation. It is Goethals. In fact, it's nice to know, I know Angela Goethals. I'm sure a lot of you have seen the film Home Alone, the girl with the French accent and who had blonde hair, that's Angela Goethals. Her great-great-grandfather, George Washington Goethals, was the first assistant engineer, the first consulting engineer for the Port Authority, and he was the chief engineer of the Panama Canal. This bridge originally was known as the Elizabeth Howland Hook Bridge, but when he passed away, they decided to name it after him, which is very appropriate. And the engineer designed for this was Alexander Lowe Waddell, who also designed the Outer Bridge crossing. That's looking straight down. Very narrow lanes, only about 8 or 10 feet. That's me. So there's my battery pack. There's the gyro. That's my camera. Always had a hard hat, safety vest. I wanted this aviation light, which didn't work, but they didn't save it for me. That's all right. I have probably more bridge paraphernalia than I know what to do with. This is my favorite of all, GWB. I've been everywhere on this bridge. This originally had 6 lanes in each direction. In 47, they paved the center for 8 lanes. And August 29th, 1962, they added the lower roadway. Again, they designed that for 4 lanes of light rail. And this is an actual piece of suspender rope from the GWB. It weighs about 14 pounds, 2 7/8 inches diameter, 271 wires. make this piece of rope, and this is genuine Roebling wire rope. This is what it looks like. I just want to show the in-home audience what this looks like, because they probably never saw this before. Makes a good tool for working out, doing little bicep curls. This is looking towards the New York side. They're the, what I call the K buildings, because the contractor was named Crater and he had a big red K at the top. So I call them the K buildings. Here's the bus terminal. Here's the approach. Actually, I think this is backwards because the approach to the roadways, I think, is here. I think this is backwards. I scanned it wrong. Here's the New Jersey side. The Jersey side is anchored into the trap rock, goes down 150 feet into the New Jersey trap rock, goes down 112 feet into the New York anchorage, which is made of concrete, reinforced concrete. Here's the Palisades Parkway approach. They're the toll booths. There's the park on the Fort Lee side. We can get a great view of the bridge from there. Here are the main cables. 26,474 wires make a 36-inch diameter cable, unlike Golden Gate Bridge has 27,572 wires. Verrazano is 26,108. So each bridge is almost similar. This has the same span width as Verrazano, 9 feet center to center. This had 4 different designs for the main cables. This is the final design at 9 feet center to center. Here's another view. There's the park on the Fort Lee side. That's looking straight down. There's the little red lighthouse. Actually known originally as the Jeffreys Hook Lighthouse. This was known as Jeffreys Hook, named after a ship's captain. This originally was at Sandy Hook, completed 1880. In 1921, it was moved to this location. It was shut down in 1948, and then it became part of the Parks Department. And I'm sure you've read the book or saw the video, The Little Red Lighthouse and the Great Gray Bridge. This was when they were painting the towers. So I was able to go on the scaffolding looking across the road deck. There's no other way you'd get this view. Looking through the steelwork. Now the bridge was supposed to be encased in stone and masonry. That architect was Cass Gilbert, who designed the Woolworth building. And there were 3 different designs. There was Baroque, Art Deco, and Gothic. Art Deco was the most favored type, but the Depression, because the port didn't want to spend the money, they left it off. So the bridge opened 8 months ahead of schedule, and the Port Authority saved approximately $1 million. He's looking up at the New York Tower. Now, mind you, this bridge is one of a kind. Just wanted to point this out. The cables are over the inner columns. They could have put one cable here and one here, but then the road deck would have to be wider. They could have put them in the middle. But again, the road deck or the floor beams, they were 10 feet high, flanges 2 feet, 106 feet long. They would have had to be wider still. So Arthur Ahmed decided, let's put them over the center columns and use these box beams to transfer the load to the outer columns. And that's why this is so unique. No other bridge has this type of design feature. And the steelwork you see here serves no function. And that arch serves no function. It's just, this is an open strut. This is an open area. So just this steelwork and the top steelwork connect the 2 uprights. Otherwise, this arch is totally functionless. It's just decoration. It's looking straight down New York side. Looking up at the steelwork. There's 4, it's considered bents. 1, 2, 3, 4, and they interconnect them with these box beams. This is the scaffolding when they were doing the painting process. Here's the New Jersey Tower. That's the flag tube. It's picked up like a handkerchief. This is 5 foot diameter of fiberglass. So it has 3 winches, 1 to pick it up and 2 to pull it taut. So it's coming down. It's the largest free flying American flag in the world. 60 by 90 feet, weighs 450 pounds. Looking through some of the steelwork. This bridge is totally amazing. There's one of the ironworkers working on the scaffolding. Again, this arch serves no function whatsoever. That's another self-portrait, myself and the electrician. I always have to make a little humor somewhere. And this took me 15 years to get this view. I waited 15 years to walk down the cable and get this view. I was ecstatic. I was like in a state of euphoria, waiting so long. And the manager at the time let me get this photograph. I was like, wow. Oh, just the only thing I'm not crazy about is the lights, because you have these beautiful horizontal, vertical lines. Now you see these circles all over, which I don't really care for. I mean, it looks nice, but you know, the port won't listen to me, of course, so I don't say anything. I know when to keep quiet. Here I'm on the cables looking up at the saddle housing. This was added later to protect the wires and the saddles inside the top. These are just windows. Then you come out this door, hook up, stand up on top of the cable, hook up to this hand rope here with your safety harness, and you just walk down the cable. Now I am on the cable band. Another close-up view. There's a real extreme close-up. Another self-portrait. That's John, one of the electricians. Now this is the Wiley Post, Will Rogers Memorial Aviation Beacon, dedicated in 1935. That's just one you see rotating at night between red and white. There I am at the top. This is the Outerbridge crossing. In case you didn't know, this was named after Eugene or Eugenius Outerbridge, first chairman of the Port Authority. There's nothing to do with an outer bridge. And he was still alive when they gave the bridge this name. And the port is thinking of, which I think would be the best procedure, is to replace it with a diagonal cable stayed bridge similar to the New Goethals, because this bridge is basically functionally obsolete. Actually, the Brooklyn Bridge is functionally obsolete. It's in great condition, but its design is so antiquated. It has a lot of flaws, which I won't really get into detail, but they're functionally obsolete. Some of them need replacement. The Brooklyn, I can't see replacing because it's such a magnificent structure. This is cool, but it needs to meet the needs of today's traffic. It really does. This was a gorgeous number 10 day. Blue sky and white clouds. They just finished painting it, so it looked beautiful. Again, this is identical to the old Goethals, except it's a little bit longer and the center span is longer. This is the Bronx Whitestone. This was completed in 23 months in time for the 1939 New York World's Fair. Again, a design of Alston Data and Othma Amun. No elevators. You have to walk up the cable or climb a rung ladder inside. In fact, on the Throgs Neck, the elevators, you have to close the door. Otherwise, if you hit the function to bring it down, it won't move. It was stuck at the bottom level. I couldn't lug my camera equipment with my backpack down the ladder. So the engineer said, why don't you climb down the ladder inside the tower and bring the elevator back up? That was a 300-foot climb. That was interesting. So then I, of course, got into the elevator, closed the door, went back up. We loaded everything into the elevator and we were fine. But that was interesting. Now, these diagonal stays were added a year later because the bridge actually is a cousin of the ill-fated Tacoma narrow span. Here I am lying on the cable. This is really cool with these vents at the top. And this is a perfect circular arch. Actually, the GWB and the Whitestone are the only two New York bridges that have two perfectly circular arches above and below the road deck. Now, this you'll never see again. The stiffening truss was removed in 2003. That is fiberglass bearings on the side of the plate girders, so the air passes over the deck harmlessly, and the Twin Towers. So I have some photos that you'll never see again. Here's the mighty Verrazano. This bridge actually, both towers do not sit on bedrock. They actually sit on sand and clay. What's keeping them afloat, more or less, or in place, is static pressure. The caissons was so huge. It's like a table like this and dropping a feather on it, on this table. That's the comparison. The static pressure is so great, these towers aren't going anywhere. And again, these are similar to GWB, 9 feet apart. This is 60 feet longer than the Golden Gate. I took this view from the Brooklyn side. Now, they recently redid the road deck, where now there's 7 lanes of traffic with a movable barrier. Instead of a solid barrier, now it's movable. And they removed this like service walkway along the sides. This is looking through to the Atlantic. Now, I also one time climbed through the towers, through the cells, and poked my camera through one of these portals. The grating was missing, and I got that. So there's no really point of any reference. So people look at this and they kind of like, but it's like, wow, for me at least. That's looking down. There's the Belt Parkway. The only way I can get this shadow here is from, let's say it's November, December. Luckily, it was a fairly warm autumn day. Here I walk down the midspan. It's looking straight down like I did a GWB. Straight down to the roadway with breakwater, let's say. That's 693 feet. Looking up at the tower. Every time I got up there, the peregrines could hear you inside and they start squawking. Sometimes they try attacking me. I just wave my hands in the air to thwart them off. I was not intimidated by them whatsoever. Sometimes I growl at them and they take off. That's me on the cable. Another view. This is the Arthur Kill lift span. This originally was a swing span. This is right next to the Goethals. This is a single track lift bridge. There's the Bayonne, I think, way in the distance. Again, no overhead catenary. It's strictly powered by diesel trains. This is a beautiful indigo blue. They painted it. This took a lot of years to rehab it and get it back in a working condition. This is between New Jersey and Staten Island. That's me at the top. Again, single track, no third rail. You rarely see it in the down position because there's only 30 feet of clearance. That's the track level. These are the lift ropes for the counterweight. There it is in the up position. There's the old Goethals. This is the Marine Parkway Bridge, designed by David Steinman, who also built the Mackinac Bridge and the Henry Hudson Bridge. This road deck was replaced and the walkway was brought to the outside of the truss. This is the Henry Hudson. The manager actually stopped traffic for me. I was like, wow, on both the upper and lower roadway for about a minute. I mean, he wasn't going to give me that much carte blanche, but that 1 minute of no traffic, I was like, wow. This walkway is now gone. It's looking up. I got to walk part of the arch. That was very unusual. I didn't think I'd be able to do that. There's the arch. Now, this is something a little different. I'm sure many of you have probably ridden this when you were kids. Well, I had a chance to climb and photograph it, the Coney Island parachute jump. My grandmother who lived in Brooklyn, I was only 10 minutes from Coney Island, used to go there all the time as a kid. So I finally got a chance to climb and photograph the jump. Now, this originally was at the New York World's Fair in 1939. It was moved to a second location, and then they finally moved it to Coney Island. There's the Verrazano in the distance. It's just a monument now. There's no parachutes. The machine room is all closed up. I was actually able to get inside the machine room. There's the beach. I had to get this upside down because I had to go over the edge, hook myself up, and then take this upside down. There was no other way to do that. They did a great job restoring it. There's my feet again. Where was it? Oh, here. Where was this? Okay. The platform at a certain level. That's looking in, looking down, looking up. I mean, this had to be color. I have this in black and white, but it has to be color. And that's the machine room. These are the winches that would raise the parachute up. One or two people would work the machine room, and a few people who worked the controller. When it reached a certain point, the brake would release and parachute weight would just make it unreal, the cable unreal off the drum. That's the aviation beacon. And then I did another self-portrait of myself at the top. And this is only 262 feet. So I was like, okay, just. And I mentioned I collect erector sets, and that's one of my sets. This is a cardboard set. And if you notice, that looks a lot like the GWB. So I said, I have to start collecting these. I had one as a kid, but I finally got the one that I always wanted, the one that builds the parachute jump, but I never build with it. I just collect. And I made this t-shirt. I said, towers look like a giant A for almond. And I have a photograph of a lot of members of the family wearing that. I mean, and Margot Almond, she passed in 2011. She said, oh, father would have loved this, which I wish I could have met him. He was a brilliant engineer. And that's me, of course, you know, on top of the spheres of the Manhattan Bridge. Now, I mentioned I did gymnastics for 20 years. And the Olympics almost came to New York in 2012. I said to myself, let me do a little practicing to see how well I can do for the Olympics. So I tried this, but my legs weren't parallel. The judge disqualified me, and that was the end of it. So that's pretty much it.
Dave, that was incredible. I feel like we were all up on those bridges with you. I mean, I was clutching my seat as we looked down.
I should have asked everyone to put on their safety belt first.
It was absolutely fabulous. And
Thank
I'm going to say more at the end, but we will take some questions.
I wanted to know, did you had to have permits for everything you did and every bridge you went on, or did you take some, like, forget it, I'll try it, some risks?
No, everything I did is totally by the book.
But where do you get the permits for?
Well, at the time, I didn't need a permit for the Port Authority or TBTA. Only the city required a permit, the city bridges. Otherwise, what I did basically, I wrote letters and made phone calls. I told them what I wanted to do. I explained everything. I told them I can get insurance if necessary. And the TBTA and the Port Authority said, fine, as long as you have insurance and you're not scared of heights, we'll take you up there.
Oh,
The
great.
city required permits though.
And the other thing is, the woman who's really responsible for the Brooklyn Bridge.
Emily Roebling, yes.
Right, you didn't mention her.
I'm sorry I didn't
They
mention.
finally put a plaque.
Yes,
in
I'm
front.
sorry.
She's really responsible.
Yes,
And,
go ahead.
and what's the Hell Gates Bridge?
Hell Gate, Hell singular, it's Hell Gate. That's between the Triborough and the other bridges. That was originally the New York Connecting Railroad. And then it was taken over by
It still
Amtrak.
exists?
It's still there. You can't miss it. It's a big arch bridge.
Okay.
It's
Thank
a
you.
spandrel arch.
Right, and I do want to invite our online questions to submit questions online.
Well, thank you very much for a magnificent presentation.
Oh, thank you.
And you are obviously a man of steel.
Well, I can say that some people say I'm steel crazy after all these years.
Spelled STILL.
Instead of being, crazy after all these years, like Paul Simon would say, I'm steel crazy.
But you have given a presentation of 1% of the bridges in New York.
Oh, I know.
So I wonder, did you research many of the others? Did you ever find a plan to build stone arch bridges, as was done for centuries before, or was it just not worthwhile putting them up? A multi-arch stone bridge over the East River would be fascinating.
Well, High Bridge or Aqueduct Bridge, originally known as the Harlem River Bridge, was a multi-stone arch bridge carrying the aqueduct across the Harlem River. And again, in 1926, 27, they took out 5 of the 80-foot arches and put in the steel arch. That was designed by John Bloomfield Jervis, where they have Port Jervis. So, but the thing is, you can only do so much with stone because it's so heavy and it's not good for flexing. Stone doesn't flex very well. That's why everything became steelwork. And then like the GWB, they wanted to encase it in stone, but it's so much money to do that, number one. Two, how would you get to all the steelwork to prevent it from rusting in the future? So I kind of glad they left the stonework off the GWB. But I know it was only, like you said, 1 or 2%, because like I said, New York has 2,077 bridges in all. That's a lot of bridges. Well, only Bronx is part of the mainland. The rest of the New York City is all islands. So you have to connect everything. So, sure.
I'd love to hear more about the experience of being up on top of these bridges. For example, do you notice a great deal of movement in the structures when you're way at the top? And if so, how do they differ one from another in terms of wind conditions and especially movement of the structure itself?
Okay, on the Brooklyn, there's very little movement. When I was on the Triborough Bridge, when trucks went over, the bridge actually swayed like this. And I was like, oh, wow, what a nice ride. Instead of like being on a roller coaster, most people just freak out about that. But they all are different. And actually, because of different paint, they all smell different. For some reason, the paints smell different. So if I was on a bridge, I could tell that smells like Hellgate. That smells like GWB. Because of the different paints used, I could tell that. And some of them were really unique. Some bridges are more rigid than others, so some sway less than others. The Manhattan Bridge, like I said, deflects like this, or used to deflect like that because of the trains. Now it's only a small amount. So every bridge was unique.
Right, I'm going to take some online questions and then I will come to you.
Okay.
First of all, this is just a comment. Do you know the 59th Street bridge designer Henry Hornbostel has his initials in the railings at the top of each tower?
Yes.
Did you know that, Dave?
Yes, I do.
Of
Yes,
course
I know.
you did. Of course.
And he was involved with a lot of other architecture. He wasn't designing, he was an architect.
Please tell us about the Hell's Gate Bridge and does it have a sister in Sydney Harbor? This is from Carlo.
Okay, the Hellgate Bridge, it's singular, and the Sydney Harbor Bridge and the Bayonne were both modeled after the Hellgate. The Hellgate came first. That was opened to traffic March 9th, 1917. The Sydney Harbor Bridge, I believe, was opened 1932, and the Bayonne was opened November 15th, 1931.
Thank you. I can't help wondering if you are a mountain climber, asked Deirdre.
No, I'm not a mountain climber. I wouldn't mind trying. What was it, El Capitan in Yosemite?
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty cool going straight up. And it's a little precarious because you have to take everything with you. I mean, everything. And you go straight up the face of the mountain. I think that'd be kind of neat. But when you get into your late 60s, you don't know if you really want to do that anymore. You know, I still like to climb bridges because it's relatively easy because you're going up only maybe 45 degrees. You're climbing a wrong ladder, but going straight up a mountain face, I'm debating about that.
Right. Well, that actually dovetails with one of the other questions.
Yes.
How recently were you on top of a bridge? This is from Jane.
Okay, last bridge I actually climbed was the Mid-Hudson Bridge in 2011. And actually, I was up there once, and unfortunately, I couldn't wait to get down because I had such severe back pain. So as the saying goes, you want to play, you're going to pay. So from my 20 years of gymnastics and 8 to 10 years of climbing the bridges, I wound up with 2 rotator cuff surgeries and had all 5 lumbar fused.
Oh,
So I've been through a lot, but, you know, and I keep plugging on. I don't give up. But I'd love to get back up on the bridges, but the 9/11 effect is what I call it, is pretty much restrictive at this point. But you know, I'm not a terrorist. I mean, I love engineering. I love the bridges. I love New York, but the bridge authorities and the government don't feel that way.
Right. Right. Well, we're sorry to hear you paid a price.
Yeah.
I'm going to return to the in-person audience and then I'll come back to the on-person questions.
Thank you. You indicated that there are over 2,200 bridges and you only showed us 20.
Yes.
You visited all of the other ones, is that correct?
I've driven over them, most of them. For
Okay.
instance, if you take the FDR Drive south or north by 96th Street, that ramps up, that's a bridge. It has a BIN number, bridge identification number. The diagonal cable stayed walkway on the west side near the Intrepid, that's a bridge. So if you think of all the bridges owned by New York City, Department of Transportation, Port Authority, Amtrak, TBTA, there's about 5,077 bridges in all.
If we go to your website, would we be able to see photos of other bridges?
Just pretty much the ones that I photographed, but I did get a chance to climb and photograph the Bear Mountain and the Mid-Hudson Bridge.
Great. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Hi, thank you so much.
Yes.
So why did you say the Brooklyn Bridge is obsolete?
Well, it's functionally obsolete because, for instance, a suspension bridge, the deck has to hang from the cables. It's suspended. As the deck reaches the center of the span and toward the anchorages, the bridge deck sits on top of the cables. So you're having two opposite forces on the main cable. The deck's supposed to hang from the main cables. There's a few other functions which I really won't get into, but the Brooklyn Bridge is in great condition, but it doesn't come up to modern specifications like the GWB of Verrazano. It's not the same. And the Brooklyn was limited on its load bearing capacity. Some people wanted to put a second deck on the Brooklyn Bridge, but I don't think it would be able to take the load. Right now, it can take, I think, up to 6 tons, but that's it. Unlike the Manhattan Bridge, it's 16,000 tons per linear foot. That's how strong the Manhattan Bridge is, but nothing like the GWB. I think it's 25,000 tons per linear foot.
I didn't know about Emily Roebling. Can you talk about
Yeah,
her?
she is the wife of Washington Roebling, the son of John Roebling. John Roebling was the engineer who built the Brooklyn Bridge. John Roebling designed it. But Washington Roebling, he worked with his men. Unfortunately, he was in the caissons. A caisson is basically, let's say this is empty. You put it into water and you have to fill it with air as you go deeper into the water. As you increase the air pressure, you can't come out suddenly because your tissues will expand too rapidly and you can get decompression sickness. The nitrogen gets into the blood. So Washington Roebling got very sick from caissons disease. They didn't know the full effects of that. I used to do scuba, so I know the effects very well. I never had that problem, but I know what's involved. Then they built GWB, which had a caisson. A caisson is basically a hole in the water. So you can seal the sides and have an opening in the water where you can work at ambient pressure. But Emily Roebling, since Washington was sick from the caissons disease, she took the notes of what needed to be done for the bridge from Washington and brought it to the workers. So she was like the communicator between the workers and Washington Roebling. And because of her efforts, the Brooklyn Bridge was fully completed. I mean, it was a big effort on her part. She learned a lot. I don't think she was an engineer, but she helped greatly in the engineering and the completion of Brooklyn Bridge. She was remarkable.
Well done, Emily.
Thank you so much. This has been so exciting for me.
Okay.
When I found out about it, I came down from Maryland, came up
Okay.
from Maryland.
Wow.
The Verrazano Bridge, you mentioned something about the suspension because it just feels different when I cross it.
Okay.
And I also wanted to know, are those spans higher than all the others? Because
The Verrazano, the towers are 693 feet. Brooklyn is 272 feet. GWB is 605. Manhattan is about 349 feet. So the Verrazano is the highest bridge, plus something that most people don't know. The deck of the Verrazano between winter and summer, the center of the deck changes 12 feet from the heat of the summer to the cold of the winter. And a fellow from the New York Times, great reporter, James Barron, he interviewed me one time, and I explained that the deck is like an elevator ride. So if you go over it in the winter, you're 12 feet lower than you were in the summer. So it deflects, it changes. And when they built the cables of the Verrazano, the actual cables deflected 27 feet from the weight of the roadway. Each roadway section is 400 tons. So the main cables actually dropped 27 feet from the weight.
Dave,
Yes.
that was spectacular. Thank you.
Sure.
What was the general reaction of the people that were accompanying you? Did they ever say that they couldn't go as far as you wanted to because they didn't have it in them?
They all, I guess, thought I was a little crazy. I told them I may be crazy, but I'm not nuts. But they just knew I loved what I was doing. They knew I had this passion for engineering and bridges. And they said, yeah, we'll help you any way we can. And a lot of the times I bring them coffee and donuts just as a way, thank you so much for helping me. In my book, I have must be at least 300 people or more. This was not just me. This was a big project that everyone assisted me. Everyone should be credited for that. I wasn't the only one that was part of this. In some way, everyone who helped me, I'm sorry, I keep hitting this microphone. Everyone who helped me is part of this project. I consider it a team effort. because without their help, this wouldn't have been possible.
Of course, and what a special experience, in terms of your relationship to have this with those wonderful tradesmen at the top of those bridges. You must have developed a very special appreciation for their
I
work.
did. I try to keep in touch with them. Some of them moved on, some passed on. One of the former chief engineers of the Port Authority, I still keep in contact with him. He was with Alan Renz and his mom. Alan Renz, I think he might be listening online. His grandfather was Gustav Linenthal and his mom was there. So she was the fourth wife of Gustav Linenthal. And this was a big celebration by on the west side, I guess the sanitation plant. There's like a big place there you can get together. I forget the name of it, but we all got together there with Port Authority people and Amtrak, and it was really great. I mean, it's so nice to know these people, and they're all pulling for me, and I can't thank them enough.
Okay, we'll just take a few more in-person questions, and I do have some online questions.
Very good talk. Super.
Thank you.
So the George Washington Bridge, did you hear about where they were going to, on the towers, they were going to put a facade on it and they changed their mind?
Yes, I mentioned that.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
what you're saying.
Yeah, it was going to be possibly either Baroque, Gothic, or Art Deco, but because of the Depression, they left the stonework off. The port saved $1 million and it opened 8 months ahead of schedule. And mind you, they were thinking of putting a restaurant or observation balcony at the top, but that was canceled immediately and it would have been closed due to 9/11 anyhow.
And I know you stopped 11 years ago. Have you ever considered doing a drone now?
No, I'm not into that. If I photograph a bridge, I want to be standing on the structure.
Okay.
Gymnastics basically taught me to hang, climb, and crawl all over the steelwork.
Okay, I'm going to take some online questions and also I feel like I've been focusing on the front of the room here. So if there's anyone, okay, actually, I will come to you, sir, and you, and then you, but then that will be it in terms of the in-person questions. But let me just run through some of the online questions. Are there any other high places you aspire to climb? From Carrie.
Nothing really at this point. I can't think of anything. I still wish, though, there's 5 or 6 other bridges I wish I could climb. Golden Gate, Bay Bridge. What is it again? The Akashi Kaiko Bridge. That's one of the longest suspension bridges in the world in Japan. And the Ben Hudson. I'm thinking of the bridges. Oh, there's one new one in Turkey. It's the longest suspension bridge in the world. If I could climb and photograph those bridges, I'd be happy. But I don't think that's going to happen, unfortunately. But in terms of climbing mountains, probably not.
Right. I am going to quickly go through these questions. There's what looks like a high pedestrian bridge in the north of Manhattan. It leads to a tower in the west. Can you tell me anything about that bridge? It's from Robin.
I don't know what bridge it is exactly.
High
Oh,
Bridge.
High Bridge. Okay. Originally known as the Harlem River Bridge. It's known as High Bridge or Aqueduct Bridge. That was the first major bridge to connect the Croton Aqueduct to Manhattan to a holding reservoir, and then it went down to the receiving reservoir, which now the New York Public Library sits. That was designed by John Jervis, the water tower. That was completed in 1872. That was to increase water pressure north of the bridge. That's the oldest bridge in New York City. The first bridge in New York, mind you, was King's Bridge, but it's probably closed over from road work. That was completed 1693. That's how old that bridge was.
Wow. How often are the lift bridges raised from George?
I'm sorry, repeat that?
How often are the lift bridges
Oh,
raised?
The lift bridges. Okay, most of the lift bridges are raised at night to exercise them. Years ago, when they were first opened, they probably raised them quite a bit due to river traffic. But at this point in time, they really can't because there's so much traffic in and out of New York City. So you only at night, you might see them raised. Maybe occasionally they'll raise or lower the Roosevelt Island Lift Bridge. They'll close that channel and open up the other channels so boats can pass.
Have you done any of the Central Park bridges? FYI, my grandfather and great uncle Samuel walked the Brooklyn Bridge on its opening in my generation. You walked it every clear Sunday as we lived in Brooklyn Heights. I am 93 from Margaret.
Wow.
Yes.
That's pretty amazing.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to get to all the online questions.
right, so my question is, when these bridge managers, you come up to them, you've brought the coffee, you've brought the donuts, you're working your personality
Yes.
here, and you ask them, did any of them hand you a gallon of paint and a paintbrush and said, while you're up there, do a little bit of touch up for us?
No, because that's all union. They wouldn't, I used to service and install X-ray equipment, Phillips, and I was union, and we frowned upon anyone non-union doing something they weren't supposed to. I had to start at the bottom and work my way up to the managers. I couldn't go above them because that would get them a little ticked off. So unfortunately, I had to go each step of the way. But most of the managers are very nice. Some of them were a little arrogant, but I said, that's their personality. Just brush it off and just continue.
Great presentation. Thank you.
Oh, sure.
Estimate of the expense that you incurred to do your project, number one,
Oh.
and number two, a ballpark, and also how do you livelihood? How did you earn a livelihood?
Okay, well, right now I'm retired. Thank goodness. Like I mentioned, I actually started off as an auto mechanic. My specialty was automatic transmissions. And after the grease and the grime and the fumes, I said I had enough. So then I went to servicing X-ray equipment, Phillips, the big Dutch giant. I did that for about 18 years. And then which I don't care, I'll tell you, they booted me, which in a way I'm glad, because I got tired of it. Working with doctors got to be a little bit difficult, working with coworkers. One time I got 5 numbers New York Lotto, $2,300, came that close to winning 3 million. And everyone was jealous and everyone wanted you to buy them dinner. And I said, I don't need this, so I didn't care. And then so I moved on doing home repairs for 8 to 10 years, maybe a little longer. And I said to a point, I had enough. So now luckily I'm retired and I can do what I want. And I don't have to worry about that. In terms of expense, bridge insurance for about 10 years was $1,600 a year. And a figure buying film, paper, exact figure, even a rough figure, I don't know. I did it because I love it, not because of the money. I mean, I didn't care. I just knew I had to get this done. Having the book self-published, that was, let's say it was over 60,000 to self-publish, quite a bit more. But because I tried a few publishers, they weren't interested. And then John Sexton, fantastic photographer. You have to see his work. John is an incredible photographer. Like I said, he worked with Ansel Adams. And he said, Dave, why don't you try Brilliant Graphics in Exton, Pennsylvania? And I went there and the guy said, yeah, I heard of you. I said, whoa, okay. So they did an excellent job on the book. I mean, they had some of their own ideas, which I absorbed. You have to be mature enough to say, okay, this might work, that might work. But I kind of wanted to be traditional with a glossy cover. Whoops, this thing just died. That. Anyhow, and so it worked out great. And so, like I said, I did this because I love it. It didn't matter how much it cost.
Right, and on that point, you will be able to purchase the said book tonight at a wonderful $60, cash only, please. But final question of the night, and I'm sorry if I didn't get round to your questions again, but I'm sure Dave would be happy to answer them at the book signing table.
I wanted to thank you for featuring the railroad trestle bridge that parallels the Goethals.
Okay.
My father was the designer for the B&O Railroad. He
Oh, no kidding.
designed and oversaw the construction
Oh,
of that
wow.
bridge. Even though
Excellent.
he was born, raised, and lived his entire life in Baltimore, and didn't tell me about this until we were driving over the Goethals one day about 20 years ago.
Wow.
My kids called him Popeye. So that bridge in our family is known as Popeye's Bridge.
Oh, cool.
And he's no longer alive,
Oh.
but every time I drive over the Goethals, I get to say hi to him.
Ah.
One quick question.
Yes.
Your love for Ansel Adams' work, did you do any of your photographs in black and white? We didn't see any black and white photographs this evening.
All the black and white is in my book. I prefer black and white. Like I said, I took these color photographs to give you, the people, an idea what it's like to climb and photograph the bridges, because we all see in color. But the black and white is how I see in here and in here. That's how Ansel Adams. See, Ansel Adams actually took some color work. There's a book called Ansel Adams in Color, but you can see his black and white work is far superior. If any of you have any other questions, if I can't answer them, feel free. My card has my website. You can contact me via email, ask me questions. I'll gladly get back to you.
Right.
So,
Dave, no, we haven't quite finished. Sorry, Dave, we want to express our huge appreciation to say your infinite knowledge would not even begin to cover everything that you know.
Okay.
And the fact that you took these absolutely incredible photographs, and what a treat to be able to see them at first hand and to hear your explanation of how they came about and your vast knowledge about the bridges.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
And just very quickly, Dave, your lecture was a long time in coming. It was so worth the wait. We're so happy that you shared your work, and your passion and sense of humor is a gift. And I love that I had this drive to do this work and at any cost, and you've given a great gift to New York City. So thank you so much.
You're
God
welcome.
bless you. Thank you.
Cool.
In conclusion, I do want to remind you all that this book can be purchased in person tonight and also through Dave's website. Thank you all for coming. We just want to make one little presentation, a little memento,
Oh, wow, cool.
right?
Excellent.
And finally, to mention our next lecture. Victoria, why don't you mention it?
If any, it's, I am doing the interview. It's with David Polamini, and it's the business of music into film. And he has a wonderful career starting out in New Jersey as a singer-songwriter, and he's a top executive at BMG Music Publishing with lots of great stories and lots of great people represented, including Jose Feliciano, Sheryl Crow, and if they're so on and on. And his son will be performing, who is new to the industry, 21, and he just got picked up by a film company in London for the original score. So that's pretty good for 21 years old. And if any of you are Sylvester Stallone fans out there, he also is the executive producer of 40 years of Rocky. So that should be good too. So I hope you can make it. Thank you.
Right. This really will now conclude. Dave is now going to sign his books. And if you don't mind, could you hold off on your questions till he gets back to the table? I would ask you that. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you so much. And
Sure.
Dave, I'm going to
Yes.
rush you back.